the sense that we have of being a kind of ghost in the machine, having a mind somehow inhabiting a body, a sort of an insubstantial mind occupying a substantial body, is traced back to, well, it's traced back beyond Cartesian dualism, but certainly Descartes was the guy who put his name to it, really, substance dualism. This idea that there is a mind which is, I think what Bergson calls unextended, and then there is a body which is made of matter and which is extended. That idea that we are a mind inside a body, that substance dualism, it's been suggested that one of the phenomenological accounts of that, if you like, I think it's Drew Leder who talks about this in The Absent Body. He says that one of the reasons why we experience ourselves as sort of insubstantial inhabitants of a substantial body, is because our body is kind of invisible to us, it's kind of absent, or it suffers disappearance as it approaches the origins of the senses. So whilst we can see our feet and our legs and our torso, our hands and our arms, we can't see our eyes. It's really obvious, but we can't see the organs through which perception takes place. We can't taste our taste buds. We can't hear our ears and so on. We can't touch our fingertips with the actual organ itself. So Drew Leder says that's one of the origins of that. We experience our own disappearance. Wherever we look, we're not there. Wherever we touch, we're not where we're touching, and so on. And he says this accounts for this body-mind split, that we're not where we think we are. As part of that, or I guess emerging out of that, is this sense that not only are we kind of ephemeral inhabitants of our bodies, but we're also agents of projection, if you like. We have a sense of intentionality that pours out of us. So when we look around the world, I'm looking around this field right now, the trees and stuff. When we look out into the world, we get a sense that there is something flowing out of us in a direction, in an outward direction. Again, this comes, I think Merleau-Ponty talks about this. The origin, the source of that intentionality is sort of lost to us. It's always been left behind in the onrush of outward pouring intention. But we do feel ourselves somehow to be behind that flow. We do seem to experience ourselves as the source of that strange outpouring. In visual terms, I mean, that's an idea that goes way back. Certainly in medieval times, as I understand it, one of the accounts of vision was there was kind of rays which poured out of the eyes, bounced off the objects of the world, rather like a bat's sonar. We know the opposite is true. We know that there's no rays coming from the eyes. There is light bouncing off objects and then pouring into the eyes. But from a sort of intuitive understanding, a naive account of what it feels like, it does sort of feel like there's something pouring out of us. That in sense of intention leaving you, leaving your mind behind in its wake, sort of. That line of intention, it seems to bring with it some implications, or there's possible implications, which follow from that, in terms of how we regard ourselves, how we regard the objects that we look upon, how we think about the world around us. This is something that features in quite a bit. I know Michael Polanyi talks about this in I Think, Being and Knowing and Being, where he talks about there are sort of two ways of looking, he says. He's talking about visual looking, but I think he's also talking about sort of phenomenological intentionality and that flow. He says we can look at a sort of, what's he call it, a two-at look. So I am looking at something, from at, I beg your pardon, from at, so I'm looking at something, and a from to sense of looking, he says. The from at is the one that we sort of enshrine within scientific looking at and refer to as objectivity. We identify an object in the world, and then we imagine this intention flowing from us and hitting the surface of it. There's an at to it. The opposite of that, not the opposite, the complementary of that in Polanyi's terms is from to looking, in which the from is the same. It's still originating inside one's idea of self, and the direction of intention is the same. But instead of sort of stopping at the surface of the object, it's kind of received. There's a sense in which something at the other end is active, not in a live sense, but active in some sort of sense of forming a relationship with the looker. There's also a trace of that in Martin Buber's writing in I Thou. He's writing from a very different source, but I think the idea is very similar. He's not talking about objects, he's talking specifically about other people, other beings, but I think you can generalize it out, honestly. He says there are two types of, I shouldn't say looking, but there are two types of relation one can form. As an intentional agent, one can form a relation of two types with another person. And depending on what relation one forms, when one's own self becomes different, the I is different depending on what relation I am in. If I am in an I-you relation, that's something parallel to Michael Polanyi's from-at relation. There is a person over there, that person is an object, they are entirely separate from myself. I am over here. The I-you that we form as a kind of two-headed unit is the I that's formed in there is very separate and hermetic, and Buber would say probably unhealthy to something not terribly progressive, or you might say Christian about that, given that he's a theologian. The alternative to that in Buber's terms is an I-thou relation, translated from the German, but thou has a bit of an archaic ring to it, but it's the nearest we can get, I think, in English. The I-thou relation is one which parallels in some ways Polanyi's from to. There is a sense that the object, in this case the person at the end of that intentional gaze, is also an intentional object, an intentional being. There's some sort of agency. There's nothing dead about it. The lights are on over there as well as them being on over here. And the symbiosis that is formed, that sort of two-headed monster that's formed in an I-thou relation, is one of mutuality, of mutual arising kind of thing. The beings at both ends of the gaze complement each other's being. That doesn't sound too tautological. So the I in the I-thou relation is one that Buber would regard as more productive, more empathetic, more complementary, probably more healthy. And I think I would tend to agree with that.